Okay, everybody, good morning. Happy Friday. We have almost made it to the weekend. We have almost made it to some playoff football. Obviously, Seattle is taking the week off, but there is still plenty of intriguing stuff going on this weekend. Can't wait to see what happens. Before we get there, though, you guys know what we like to do on Fridays. You guys know what Friday is all about. It's all about the pass rush. So we're going to be doing our Pass Rush Friday here, the final regular season edition of Pass Rush Friday. I imagine that we'll continue to do this series for the postseason, but obviously at the same time, it's kind of a regular season tracker. And once you get into the postseason, you're only playing in a couple of games. You're only playing in at most 4 games. You have a small sample size. This is kind of meant to see where things sit over the course of a 17-game season because you're obviously susceptible to a small sample size with just a few games. All right, everybody, before we go any further into the video, I want to take a minute to tell you guys about a wonderful app called Sleeper, a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat about sports in real time with other users. You can get all kinds of scores, sports news, and sports alerts with blazing fast speed. And of course, you can play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So enjoy sports with other people in a community. Download the Sleeper app today and remember to use the promo code SBN, that is SBN, for up to a $100 match on your first deposit. And they also have a free $20 entry right now, no deposit required, so pair those two up. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states and growing. Check out the Sleeper app and have fun with sports this year. Right. So I will go ahead and just acknowledge the fact that the pass rush that the Seahawks brought into the last part of the season was not as intimidating and as fearsome as the pass rush they had through much of the earlier part of the season. And I think this Niners game in some areas was better than what we had seen, but there is still something of a there's something missing from this pass rush. And this is a big reason why we talk so much about Max Crosby on this channel, because I really do think that getting that money in the bank edge rusher is something that could help this team get to their final phase. And they're obviously a great defense right now, even without Max Crosby, but there is something a little bit lacking with this pass rush that I think somebody like him would really alleviate. So let's take a look at the numbers and then look at the numbers for the whole year. The defensive line in this game, pretty forgettable for the 5th or 6th game in a row. They were just whatever. Nothing from Leonard Williams, nothing from Byron Murphy in the way of pressure. So that's pretty rare that you see both of those guys get shut out, and it's the second time it's happened in 3 games. Obviously Murphy, we get what's going on with Murphy. I think he's playing a lot of his snaps as a nose. He's not going to get a ton of pass rushing opportunities, but I do feel like Williams has kind of worn down as the season's gone on, and the bye week is probably very good for him. So I'm glad that he's able to get some snaps off. I will also say, in the interest of fairness, we didn't play a ton of snaps in that game defensively, so there are going to be fewer opportunities to get pressure. Jarran Reed, though, coming in clutch with 2 pressures, his first pressures in a very long time this year. He basically, between the injury and just not getting pressure, there was a 2-month period where he was not getting to the quarterback at all. And then in this game, he had 2. So if you take a look at the year, end of year stuff as a whole, Leonard Williams exceeded my expectations, and so did Byron Murphy. Neither guy was able to finish as strong as they started, but they both did very well this year. Williams in particular, I really thought was going to have a lesser year than he did last year, and he did, but not by as much as I thought. And Murphy really came along strongly compared to where he was last year as a rusher. We still didn't meet my projection by 2 pressures, which I'm not really going to worry about that. That's not really anything that I'm thinking about. But it was pretty much all because Jarran Reed just ended up not really being a pressure guy this year. And I'm fine with that. I think Jarran Reed did his job, and he did miss a bunch of games. That's obviously not going to help. But at the same time, I do think it highlights the fact that either Riley Mills needs to be a guy for us next year, or we need to get another defensive lineman that can make something of an impact. So one way or the other, I think we're going to need one more guy. Mike Morris had his one pressure, by the way. It might have come when he was lined up as an edge rusher. I'm not sure, but doesn't really matter. So we end up with 57. I projected 59. So very close. I'm certainly not going to grandstand over two pressures. Um, Linebacker, again, another game with no pressure from the inside linebackers. Zeros across the board, fifth game in a row. It really kind of became not a part of what we're doing over the last month plus of the season. And overall, I would say that there was a little bit of a disappointment in what we got out of Ernest Jones here. Ever since he got here, he's been fantastic. Not a lot of pressure, though. And when he was in LA, that was considered one of his great strengths. He was what a phenomenal blitzing linebacker. So it is kind of interesting that he's joined this Mike McDonald defense and it's become a much more subdued part of his game. He ended up with 4 pressures this year. I projected 7. Tyrese Knight had 2. I projected 5. Of course, I thought that Tyrese Knight would play more than he did, so that's kind of a misleading number. And it's all made up for because Drake Thomas has been great getting pressure this year. 7 quarterback pressures from him. And I didn't expect anything there because I didn't think he'd really be playing. So we still met and exceeded our projection. By the way, Pat O'Connell had 1 back in week 12. So 14 from the inside linebackers. I projected 12, so that's slightly better. And it was it still felt like there was some stuff left out there, but I think that this team just decided they didn't really want to send their inside linebackers that much. There were moments of it, like the 3 that Drake Thomas had in game number 12, and Tyrese Knight obviously had the 2 strip sacks in the one game, but it wasn't as big a part of what we were doing this year as I was expecting. All right, edge rushers. This one obviously very up and down here, right? So Uchenna Nwosu, 1 pressure in this game. DeMarcus Lawrence had 1 pressure. Derek Hall kind of stole the show this week with 3 pressures. He led the team and was our most impactful edge rusher overall. He also had a sack. 5 pressures total from the edge rusher crew. That's not bad. Could have been better. Remember, this is Pro Football Reference. They're a lot harsher with their pressure numbers. But obviously, you've also seen a lot better this year. So you look at where things have ended up this season. Uchenna Nwosu did exceed my expectations by a little bit. He definitely leveled off in the second half of the year pretty strongly. He had 6 pressures combined over his last 8 games. But I wasn't expecting a ton from him this year because I knew he was coming off the injury. So he still met and exceeded my expectations. And the guy who crushed the expectations, of course, was DeMarcus Lawrence, who had 39 pressures. And the only reason why he didn't get to 40 is the couple of games that he missed. So I expected 23. I didn't think he was going to be a big pressure guy this year. He really got his mojo back from his prime in Dallas, and he was about as good of a pass rusher as he ever was in Dallas. Unfortunately, Boye Mafe was kind of I don't even want to say kind of, he was a pretty big disappointment this year. And Derek Hall, while I don't think he was a disappointment because he did miss several games and he did improve a lot as a run stopper, he did not get the kind of pressure that I necessarily thought he was going to get this year. I'm definitely a lot higher on Hall at this point because I think that he did offer more, whereas Mafe played in every game and still only averaged 1 pressure a game. But yeah, both guys fell short. So there's not really a ton to say there. I think Maffei's just, he doesn't have that next level to his game, which at this point isn't terribly surprising, but I thought it was possible because last year I think he played most of the year injured with his shin, but last year he was actually probably a more effective player than he was this year. I'm still optimistic about Hall developing into something a little bit more than he currently is right now, but definitely a little bit short of expectations, and we ended up getting exactly 100 pressures out of the edge room this year. I projected 105, so pretty close, but technically just a little bit short. There are a lot of different reasons why you fell short. On the one hand, yes, Mafe should have been better, but on the other hand, guys like D-Law and Derek Hall would have probably gotten us there and then some if they hadn't missed time this year. Remember, because these guys missed time, you ended up having to turn to guys like Connor O'Toole at edge. So that obviously diminishes what you're expecting to get back. Okay, so that's the edge rusher stuff. Cornerback, nothing from this game. And overall on the year, it ended up being a little bit more of a thing than I thought it would be. Devin Witherspoon missed about a third of the year, and he still ended up with 7 pressures. I projected 5. I I kind of think corner blitzing should have been a bigger part of my projections when I was doing this in the offseason. We definitely sent Witherspoon a good amount more than I thought we would, and he was very effective at it when we did send him. We also got 1 from Reek Woolen, and we also got 2 from Josh Jobe. Wasn't expecting much there, but we did get some production from those guys. So 10 pressures from corners this year. I expected 6. And then we get to safety, and safety's kind of tricky, right? Because most of our pressures came from Eman Wari, and he mostly played corner this year. But if you're, however you want to slice it, I put him at safety, so I decided to leave him at safety for the purpose of this video. And you can see I expected 7 pressures, and that's what we got, including 1 this last game where he laid a pretty good hit on Brock Purdy. So Eman Wari ended up being a really effective blitzer this year. He had as many pressures as Witherspoon. And remember, he missed games too. So he was by far the most effective guy here. We did get a little bit from Okada. We got a pressure from Anthony Bell against Baker Mayfield. I think he had a sack. And then you also had that week 1 sack by Julian Love, but then he basically missed the whole season after that, barely played, and ended up with just the 1. And Kobe, we barely ever sent him on the blitz. So that ended up not being a big part of what we did this year. I kind of feel like McDonald didn't get to use the safety blitz as much as he intended because of all the injuries. Hard to know exactly why things broke out the way they did, but 12 pressures and I projected out 15, so still fairly close. And it's understandable. Again, you're putting less experienced players out there. You're going to maybe work a little bit harder to keep them out of situations that you don't feel comfortable with them in. We ended up playing most of the year with Okada as our starting safety, so I get it. And yeah, 12 total. I projected 15, and you can see that we ended up falling just short of the projection overall, 193. I said 197. I don't feel too bad about that. 197 is still really good. And 8 total this last game, which is, it doesn't sound great, but you got to remember the 49ers only ran 42 offensive plays. So you're not going to get as much pressure as you would in a normal game anyway. So it's really not that bad. And if they had thrown a normal number of times in that game, maybe we would have seen enough pressure to get to the projection. But 193 is still very good. That is well over 10 pressures a game. That is in line with about 10 and a half, or excuse me, 11 and a half pressures a game on average. I can live with that. From PFR, that is pretty strong. That is going to be among the league leaders. Well, given how strong we started, we probably should have gotten to 200. Didn't happen, but at the same time, I can understand why. Like I said, this team does not have a money in the bank pass rusher like a Myles Garrett, like a TJ Watt, like a Max Crosby. They make do with guys that are very, very good, but are not necessarily on that level. And they certainly do make do. All right. So that is going to be it for Pass Rush Friday for this week. And of course, the whole season. I imagine, ooh, excuse me. I imagine we'll do this again in a week, in a couple of weeks for the playoff game. But obviously, these videos are more meant to track the regular season anyway. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks, and I'll see you guys later. Another video coming soon.